right, esteemed colleagues from universities near and far, as well as esteemed colleagues from the New Jersey court system, welcome to our webinar here for the Judicial Clerkship panel. And thank you very much to all of our attendees coming in from Temple University, Penn State University Park, Penn State Dickinson, George Washington University Law School, UPenn Law School, Villanova Law School, Widener University Commonwealth Law School, and Widener University Delaware Law School. Thank you very much all for being here. My name is Ryan Vicinage, and I will be your moderator for today. I currently serve as the Chief of Organizational Development and Training here at the New Jersey Courts, and I am proud to be presenting to you all of our fabulous judges, as well as one of someone who would be an esteemed colleague of yours as a current law clerk. And we are going to talk to you a little bit about the law clerk position here at the judiciary and why that is an important position and why it might be something that would behoove you to consider as you're moving forward in your law career. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I've already introduced myself and I will be the kind of voice of reason as we get further into this conversation today. But I will also be introducing our panelists who are a group of 3 judges, as well as one of your esteemed law clerks. All of our judges are representing different backgrounds from all different parts of law, as well as different parts of the judiciary and with different responsibilities. So they can provide you with a whole host of different thoughts along the way. And I encourage you to join the discussion. We will be going back to the Q&A function throughout the program. So we want to be hearing from you and hearing what questions you have and what you think are important things for the judges to be discussing. Our discussion today should run approximately 1 hour, so hopefully we don't run into any snags or snafus technically, but if you do, we hope that you forgive us as we are all trying to learn and grow through this process. So just a little bit of information for you and to give you an idea as to kind of what you're getting yourself involved with. The New Jersey court system is giving you a warm welcome and is recognized as a system that is respected nationally for our progressive and innovative work. Additionally, we have advanced information technology infrastructure that has enabled us to do the critical work of the courts, even despite the fact that COVID-19 has stopped all in-person experiences. We have been able to transition in a short 3-day period into a court system that runs entirely from a remote location. As you did know, we have the largest statewide law clerkship program in the nation. Well, we do. Each year, our judges hire approximately 480 law clerks statewide, and our panelists are here today to describe the critical work of our judicial law clerks and give you some information on the application process and how you can become part of that law clerkship program. I'm going to quickly introduce our esteemed panelists and everybody who is going to be talking to you today. I'll introduce each of them one by one, and then I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves so you get a better idea as to who is in the crowd here and who you're going to be learning from today. So first, from the Burlington Vicinage, we have our assignment judge, the Honorable Jeanne Covert. If you wouldn't mind saying hello, Your Honor.
Hello, hello. Do you want me to introduce myself now or wait?
Just wait just a second. I'm going to introduce all of our esteemed panelists, and then I'll come back to you first. Second, we have the Honorable Judge Susan Maven, who's coming to you from the Atlantic Cape May Vicinage.
Hello there, everybody. Hello.
Excellent. Thank you, Judge Maven. And finally, for our judge panel, we have the Honorable Ray Velazquez, coming to you from the Hudson Vicinage. Judge Velazquez.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you. And finally, from the Law Clerk Program, representing Villanova Law and the Burlington Vicinage, we have John Morgan. Can you say hi, John?
Hey, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I promised to go back to you first, Judge Covert. Would you mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you're representing?
Sure. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm Judge Covert. I work in Burlington County. I'm the assignment judge there, which is sort of like the head judge. You do more administrative work, but there's also substantive work that you do. From my background, I'm a Philly girl. I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs in Pennsylvania and have connections to a lot of the schools that are represented here. My son went to Penn State. Woo! UPenn and Temple. My husband worked at both of those as a professor. My son's now going to graduate school at GW in the fall, hopefully. My brother and sister went to Villanova Law School, and I have had my present clerk from Villanova Law School. And I also went to U of D undergrad. So I feel like I have every single school covered here in some personal way, which is nice. And I've had law clerks from GW as well. In my own personal experience, I went to Rutgers Law. Even though I was from PA for personal reasons, I ended up going to Rutgers Camden, and I've established myself in New Jersey and spent the rest of my career here. So you just never know what's going to happen. It's a great place to start in a clerkship. I was in private practice for 10 years. I worked for prosecutors' offices for 10 years. And then I went on the bench. I started in family division. I moved to criminal division, became the presiding judge in criminal, then moved to the civil division, became the presiding judge in the civil division before landing in the assignment judge position, which is where I am now. So welcome everyone. And that's my background, and we'll talk more later.
We certainly will. Thank you very much. Judge Maven, would you mind introducing yourself?
Certainly. Okay. I'm Judge Maven, Susan Maven. I'm born and raised in New York, from Long Island. After I graduated high school there, I went to the University of Pennsylvania for undergrad. And after I finished my 4 years there, I went on to Temple Law School. While at Temple Law School, I developed an interest in land use planning, and that was my desired interest. And from there, I was referred to a law firm in Atlantic City that was very involved in land use planning. And so I came to Atlantic City, and that's where I started my career in 1987. I've been here ever since. Since coming to Atlantic City, I was in practice, initially private practice with a large law firm here, which is now been subsumed. It is now Fox Rothschild. And but at the time, I did land use planning representing casinos and other large developers at the time. Then I went to work for an agency, the Atlantic County Improvement Authority, where I was their in-house counsel, and we oversaw a lot of construction projects. So I was very involved in real estate development type work, bonding, finance, public bonding work, and the like. So a lot of work getting Atlantic City rebuilt using casino dollars and private dollars. From there, I was appointed by the governor to the Casino Control Commission, where I was a commissioner for 3 years, overseeing the regulations of the casinos back in its heyday. And then from there in 2001, I was appointed to the bench, and I've been a judge since December of 2001. Since on the bench, I began in family division, worked many years in the family division, transferred a couple of years to the criminal division, then back to family. And then I was elevated to the appellate bench, where I sat in the appellate division for approximately 4 years before deciding to come back to the trial bench, back to family, where I am now. And I enjoy family law immensely. And that's my history. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my experience as we get into our discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Judge Maven. Judge Velazquez, would you mind giving us a brief introduction to your history?
Absolutely. I went to Rutgers undergrad, went to Notre Dame Law, and when I graduated in '92, there were no big fancy jobs for me because it was a little bit of a time where it was very tough to find work. Luckily, I had a brother here in Hudson County who had been practicing law for a substantial period of time, and he made a little room in the office, and I started doing general practice and started to do a lot of trial work, some mostly civil, some occasional criminal work. And I ended up doing that for about 10, 15 years, and then started to get into politics a little bit and got elected to the county freeholder board as a city council person a little bit later. And that all that experience led to me being appointed to the municipal court back in 2007, where I sat on the municipal court for 3 years. And then in time, I became appointed in 2016 to the Superior Court, where I sat in landlord-tenant originally. I've been sitting for the last year and a half in the family part, where we're doing termination of parental rights and child and abuse cases, which are very rewarding cases, a type of docket that I enjoy very much. That's about my history there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Your Honor. And finally, John, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is John Morgan. I'm originally from Kansas. I went to undergrad at Emporia State University. I doubt anybody here has ever heard of that. I originally was studying to be a math teacher, and then at the very last second, I decided I didn't actually want to do that. I really wanted to go to law school. So I moved to Pennsylvania and went to Villanova Law, graduated in 2019, becoming the first person in my family to graduate from law school. And I started clerking in Burlington County for the Honorable Judge Smith in the Civil Division. Judge Smith has a docket of pretty much all types of civil cases: commercial, real estate, personal injury, collection matters, employment discrimination, things of that nature. So I've been assisting her for the past almost year now. And I hope to start out maybe doing personal injury type work on the defense side. And ultimately, my goal is to end my career as a judge or a law school professor. So that's a little bit about my background, and I look forward to talking more about that in detail once we start the panel.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the lofty goals there as well. So let's jump into our questions here. We have a few questions, and I'll direct the question first at one judge, and then I'll ask each judge to bring in a little bit of their perspective on this as well. And John, you'll be asked to jump in here with your practical experience and what that looks like. So I'll be directing, I have 3 questions here, and it's kind of more broadening out the discussion. We want to create more of a discussion flow here. So the first question is going to be for Judge Maven, and John, I'd love for you to give your perspective on here as well. What is it like to work as a clerk in the New Jersey courts? Judge Maven, can you give us a perspective on that?
Certainly. Okay, again, I think that as a clerk, the clerks have an excellent opportunity to really see what happens in the court system, behind the scenes, operationally, things that you wouldn't see if you were walking in the front door. As a clerk, you have a particular relationship with your judge that will allow you to work very closely with him or her as they prepare the cases that they are going to hear, their docket, whichever case type you're in, and to work with the teams, the judiciary teams that work behind each judge. Structurally, the court is set up as a unified system. So in New Jersey, unlike some other states where it may be different, in New Jersey, of course, all the judges are appointed. They're appointed, and the operation starts from the top down with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court as the CEO, if you will. Okay, the chief, well, he's like the chairman of the board. And then we have an administrative director who's like our CEO, and he oversees all of the operations from Trenton, the administrative office, to the courts, setting policy that flows down to all of the judges. So each division, family, civil, criminal divisions, as well as municipal court, but for us, those 3 divisions are all directed by overall policies. But when it comes down to handling cases, judges have their discretion and have their directives to manage their caseload. The law clerks are if our secretary is our right arm, the law clerk is our left arm. And it's like a 3-legged stool to make our offices work. So the law clerks work very carefully, closely with the judges to ensure that the files are prepped, write-ups and background information is provided. Is done if the judge needs particular research on a waiting in their briefs, or if they raise questions about different law, law clerks can certainly look beyond that. They work very closely with the judges and again, very closely with the team. Each judge has a team, administrative staff from the clerks, from the recorder who's in the courtroom, when we go on the record, keeping track of what's being said on the record, to team leaders who ensure that all the background filings, pleadings are organized. The law clerk works closely with that team to ensure that the judge has everything he or she needs for every case that comes forward. And that's why it's very important that a clerk is organized, is driven, can follow direction from a judge, but also working closely with your judge, you learn to incorporate what that judge needs so you can anticipate what your judge needs. So a clerk needs to be sharp. They need to be able to multitask, keep things moving, and just handle a lot of things all at one time. Depending upon the court that you're in and the way your judge operates, you may need to work longer hours than 8:30 to 4:30, which are the typical court hours. Sometimes if a judge comes in early and that's the way the judge functions, some judges like to come in very early to get things done before the day gets started and sort of out of their control. So sometimes they may want their clerk to be in early also, because that's when you can actually sit, talk, and think about things before the day gets started. Some judges like to work late, after hours, when things quiet down, so you can wrap up things for the day or get prepped for the next. So you have to be malleable in your schedule and be willing to sort of sometimes stretch the hours working with your judge to make sure that things get done and get completed appropriately. Frankly, I think from all of the clerks that I've had, they've all had a good experience and were able to take that experience to the next level, to their next job, because you learn a lot about how lawyers work. Sometimes you see the best work of lawyers, and sometimes you see work that's not so great. And so you learn when you read some briefs, you'll learn maybe things should be written a little bit better. Legal briefs should be, a little bit better. Or maybe you see the oral arguments, or see the way, the temperament of attorneys, the way they act in court, the way they respect each other or greet each other, the way they treat their clients and adversaries. All of that observation, you'll have that opportunity to observe all of that when you work with your judge in the courtroom, and even behind scenes when there are conferences with the judge in chambers. So you have that opportunity that a lot of people just don't get. It's a unique experience for that 1 year. John, you can jump in. You have some practical experience. Am I speaking the truth?
Judge Maven, I sort of took all of my talking points. You basically hit the nail on the head. Everything I would have said. I guess what I will emphasize, at least as far as civil goes, because I'm civil right now, is everything sort of revolves around the motion day for civil. Every 2 weeks in New Jersey is what we call motion day, and we get a list that's usually between 65 and sometimes 100 motions, and our job is to organize and file all of those motions, all of the courtesy copies of the motions and oppositions, and then depending on what your judge prefers, do some sort of write-up of the motion, like a bench memo, or even just a little explanatory memo summarizing all of the arguments. And then you have to schedule oral argument and send out notices to the attorneys to schedule oral argument. So at least from my perspective, the job sort of revolves around the motion day. However, like you said, Judge Maven, there's a lot that you learn besides just how to file things and, how to write a nice bench memo. You also learn little idiosyncrasies about what it's like to practice in Burlington County, for example, or wherever you work, and what different judges prefer as far as how things are presented and courtesy copies and things of that nature. So while you can read the rules till you're blue in the face, it really, you might not notice certain little details, like in Burlington County, the last number of your docket will determine which judge it gets assigned to, for example. Little things like that are unique to county to county will definitely help you when you're practicing law, because it'll give you an advantage over people, just a slight advantage, but a significant one.
I want to weigh in a little bit also about the difference between trial clerkships and appellate clerkships. As I mentioned earlier, I also sat on the appellate court, so I've had the experience of having appellate clerks, and the role is very different. In the appellate court, the way the court works is the judges sit in groups, and we receive our files of cases for that particular week. It's the clerk's responsibility to write clerk memos and to summarize each of the briefs that is submitted at the appellate level. The work there is intense in that it's a lot of research, a lot of writing, and you don't have interaction of the courts or the teams that I spoke of, because depending upon where you're sitting with your appellate judge, you're not really in touch with the administrative offices, which are in Trenton. So working on the appellate court is a little more isolated because you don't have you're not necessarily in a courthouse or have access to the trial court teams. Rather, you're working with your judge and maybe other appellate clerks who are in that chambers. So it's a little more isolated. It's a little bit more heady because you're doing just research and writing, and you don't often go to court at all unless the judge will take you with him or her when they go to the appellate arguments. It's not as a dynamic experience, meaning interactive, as it is on the trial court level, but it is a more intensive writing and research experience. So if you're more cerebral and you like that type of work, appellate clerk may be what you're looking for. Oftentimes they're looking for persons who have been on law review, law journal, and those editors and those types of positions in the law school. Whereas trial court clerks, really, you can have a varied experience in law school and have probably a broader opportunity to become a law clerk on the trial court level. It's a bit more competitive to be an appellate court clerk. So there are some differences in the nature of that. And I would suggest that if you're seeking that kind of work, that you research the judge, see what kind of work that judge is doing, and just make sure that you are applying in a place where you want to do that kind of work.
Excellent. Judge Maven, I think you might be cheating here. You're reading from both John and my notes along the way here, because the question that I was about to ask you was about the difference in appellate court appellate court clerkships. But I do want to pass this conversation on.
In that regard.
I do want to pass this conversation on a little bit over to Judge Covert. Judge Covert, can you share a little bit of your perspective here as well? And can you also tell us how the duties might differ between the different trial courts?
Sure. I have been in every division, so they're all different. The one thing I would say is whatever judge you clerk for, you will develop an expertise in that area. Think about it. By the time you're done that clerkship, you'll have handled more motions than any attorney could possibly handle in their first, second, third, fourth, fifth year of practice all in one, because it's nonstop. You're getting cases nonstop, which makes you very desirable on the other end. When you're done that clerkship, you go out into practice in that area, you're desirable because any private practitioner knows you have that level of experience that you're going to need. If you're in civil, it is motion civil practice. You try cases, but not that many during the course of a year. That's really where you would get into the jury instructions and helping the judge prepare for those jury trials. In the criminal division, you're going to be preparing sentencing memos for your judge, and also dealing with motions, testimonial motions, like motions to suppress, where you'll see witnesses. But you're preparing those sentencing memos. Also, post-conviction relief applications, you're going to write actual opinions for those. And occasionally you're going to be writing actual opinions in every division. Every judge is different in terms of what they want. Some judges like a lot of written opinions, and other judges like to give oral decisions on the record. either way, you're helping that judge be prepared for how they want to deliver that opinion, and you're going to get good experience in it. Family is also motion driven. Often family motions are every week instead of every other week, just to, so you can stay on top of it. There's a lot of them. So that's a little different, and it's very emotional work. And that's why some people like it so much, because you're making such a difference when you're in the family division on families and children in their lives. It's very rewarding. They're all rewarding in their own way, and each division will give you a different experience. If you have something in mind that you want to do, you're going to probably want to apply to a judge who does that kind of work. I really, maybe you think you want to do civil, and so you're going to try and apply to a civil judge. Just keep in mind that judges get reassigned to different divisions sometimes, so that can happen to you. And I've often heard from my clerks that they thought they wanted to do family, let's say, and then the judge got reassigned to civil and they loved it, and that's what they did for the rest of their career. So you never know at those infant stages of your law career what you're going to end up doing, and just be open to all the possibilities. I would agree with everyone else. There's nothing like the judge-law clerk relationship. Maybe the secretary, and you want to get along with the judge's secretary. I'll just give you that little piece of advice, because those are the most important relationships in chambers. They last a lifetime. I have dinner with all of my law clerks every year. We're like a family. You get to work with a whole group of people your same age. There's no other job like that, where there's all these people the same age as you going through the same thing, and they're all your colleagues. So every one of my law clerks has said, that's the best year I ever had, hands down. So I think enough can't be said about what a great experience it can be, no matter what division you land in.
Thank you very much, Judge Covert. Judge Velazquez, I'd love your perspective on how you interact with your law clerks and the expectations that you hold for your law clerks. Judge Velazquez, I believe you're muted.
I was trying to be polite to everybody else, so I muted my mic and I forgot. That's one of the hazards of the new lives that we're living. Law clerk is a really important thing in my life. I'm doing termination of parental rights. It's over 90% of the cases are appealed. And so a law clerk is, for me, particularly in the family division, dealing with child abuse cases, the most important thing. And when we're looking for these types of people that are going to come into our lives for a brief period of time, and we want them to have the most important impact, of course, we're looking at grades, right? We're looking at the grades. There's no way to get around that. But grades certainly aren't the only thing. They're the first thing we're looking at. And so it's important that you take care of that business. But in terms of getting involved in the process and looking to become a law clerk, make sure that when you do apply that you get a good writing sample, right? You want a good writing sample with no errors in it, that's clear, has proper citations, so that's your best tool, right? Because I'm looking for people who can write. I'm looking for somebody that if I'm struggling with an opinion and I can't figure out how to say it, they're going to help me say it. And so it's important that your writing sample be the best one that you have available to you. Let us know about your experience in school. Let us know if you've done any particular type of legal research, or if you had any particular experience in law school that's unique and different, where you did something besides just studying and taking tests. I mean, we want to know if you had an externship, if you were part of a clinic, if you took helped out some lawyer at a part-time job doing interrogatories for him. Those are all things that tell us a lot about you that goes beyond what you're learning in the individual school. It tells us that you have some basic common experience in the practice of law that's going to maybe translate to being helpful to us here. in terms of like knowing the law, we don't expect you to know very much when you show up, right? So what we want to know is that you have the ability to learn. You have the background that shows us that you're a hard worker, that you're someone who wants to learn and has the ability to learn. We'll teach you. That's not going to be an issue. We'll show you exactly what you need to do. When we talk about like, how do I actually pick people that I want to interview? You know, again, I'm looking at their resume. I'm looking at what they've done, not only in their law life, but what they've done in their personal life. Is there any particular thing that's in that resume that tells me that this may be a good candidate? For example, you know, I did part-time work for a family a practitioner in my hometown or whatever. That tells me that you're someone who's interested in family. And I'm looking for somebody who's interested in family. I get a lot of people who have shown up and said, listen, I want to be a criminal law clerk. And, you know, I have to tell them, well, you know, I'm assigned to the family part. So I don't know that I can help you this year, but you don't want that to happen. You don't want to show up to the actual interview and present yourself in that way. But believe it or not, I've had that happen 2 or 3 times. And I'm sure some of the other judges have seen that too. Not that I won't hire somebody who needs a job. There are a lot of people that have different interests and just need a job. I get that. And so I'm glad to interview experienced people who have the capability and the talent to be a law clerk. But at the same time, if there's someone who's really interested in what I'm doing and have similar qualifications, it's going to be tough for you if you told me that you'd rather be doing something else. Your cover letter, right? We see those same form letters every year come in. We know which schools give out certain form letters. That's your time to connect with your judge when you're trying to get their attention. The form letter is great to give you an example of how the letter should be written, but write your own letter. Stand out, because we're getting hundreds of the same letters that say basically the same thing, and you're not going to stand out that way. Your resume might stand out, but you may only have one moment. My secretary might be walking up to me and say, listen, I've got 5 applications here as I'm walking to start a hearing, and I've got like 3 seconds to look at him to tell her, well, why don't you call these people in? That one letter that is a unique letter might be the difference that gets you the interview. So I encourage you to do that. Be careful. Know how to spell difficult names. I call myself Ray Velazquez because that's what I've been calling myself for many years. Is Radames Velazquez. I can tell you that I've had educated law school graduates who have sent me resumes and they've spelled my name wrong. I don't really care. It doesn't offend me. It doesn't make me mad that people don't know how to spell my name, but it says something, right? What does it say? It says I'm not careful about what I'm doing. And so that's what you want to avoid. So make sure that you're proofreading these things. Make sure that you're having other folks proofread it for you so that you can be satisfied that what you're uploading is the best product that you have. Now, when you actually get the interview, and I'm sure many of you will, this is it, right? This is when you want to connect with the judge. But as Judge Covert said, I have the same routine. You spend 15 minutes outside my office with my secretary and probably with my clerk from my courtroom, because they understand this is a dynamic thing too, right? This is like, we've got to spend a year together and we have to get along. And so they're very interested in knowing who I'm going to interview and who I may hire, because it affects the dynamics of the office. So make sure that when you go into that office the first time, that you connect with those people too, that you make those people feel important, and that you understand that they serve a very important purpose. And I tell you that just in general, when you go out and practice law in the world, when you go to the courthouse the first time, be very nice to all the people working in the courtroom. The judge is there, right? The judge is there. We're all going to stand up for the judge. But let me tell you something. Talk to those clerks. Talk to the people helping you find the forms and where to pay the fees. spend time building relationships with those people. You'll find that you'll get in and out of the courthouse a lot faster if they like you. And if you don't, you may spend a little bit longer than you want to be in a courthouse to get your case heard.
Definitely the truth. Definitely the truth.
Tell me.
Do want to continue this conversation.
Yes, go ahead.
Velazquez, but I do want to hear, and you brought up a great point, and I think everybody is reading from my notes right now, and so I'm feeling a little bit of a certain way about things because Judge Velazquez is bringing us to our next point almost inherently. So thank you very much. But I do want to hear from the audience. Kevin or Keith, do we have any questions coming from the audience?
Yes, we do. One question, is there a preference for New Jersey residents and/or do you have to be a New Jersey resident in order to serve as a law clerk with New Jersey courts?
No, you don't, because it's a year-long clerkship. We don't have a residency requirement. I would say the majority of my clerks live in Philly. It's because Burlington's very commutable to Philadelphia, and they seem to like living there. Some of them don't, but some of them do. And so it doesn't really matter. However you feel like you can commute to work is fine. So, yeah.
You want to keep certain things in mind, though, right? There are certain parts of the state that are much more expensive to live than other places. So when you're applying for these jobs, you have to understand, I forget what the job pays, but you've got to be honest and realistic with yourself when you're making these applications. This is something that you can actually commit to doing. So, and I think sometimes people don't always factor that in, and I just think I'm right outside of New York, and some of the apartments out here are very expensive. So just keep that in mind when you're making your choices as to where you're applying in the state.
Absolutely. Kevin, another question.
Come to South Jersey.
Come to South Jersey for sure.
Come to South Jersey. It's cheaper.
I can find you places to share. I'll help you. I just like people to know because it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
Judge Velazquez, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but how influential are GPAs when going into the selection process?
I mean, I think it varies for judges, but I think it's important. It's very important for most judges, right? We want to see that you have the ability to do this work at a level that, we've got a lot to do in the courthouse. Everybody has their role. Everybody's trying to get through the day. We have lots of cases, and now we even have greater challenges with having to do court from home. So we want the best that's available. So to the extent that your grade shows that you're a hard worker, that you understand the law, that you can not only write about the law, but understand the law and analyze the law, that's probably going to help you a little bit better than someone whose GPA is a little lower. But it's not the only thing. I've had people, I've interviewed people with, different GPAs, and people can make up for that, but it just getting through that door getting through that initial door is the hardest part there, because I think most judges will go to the computer, they'll look at the grade first, and then they'll interview those people first. That doesn't mean that you won't get an interview. It just means that it's going to be a little harder for you.
May I just chime in also? Back in the day when I first came on the bench, and even when I was in school, back in the days of dinosaurs, a clerkship was somewhat like the last thing you would think about. I recall, everyone was lining up for the interviews from the placement office for the law firms in Philadelphia, and or public defenders, or the different institutional officers. But the law clerk was like, well, if nothing else happens, I'll apply for a law clerk. Well, now law clerk positions are extremely competitive. In New Jersey, every trial court judge has one clerk. The appellate clerk judges have two. The Supremes have 2 or 3. So, there are about 400 or 500 positions available for clerkships. But of that, it's extremely competitive now. So grades are important because it's sort of like everything else, it sets a bar. However, agreeing with Judge Velazquez that it does that. If you have other skills, other passions, other experiences, you have to sell yourself just like anything else. But you want to make that cover letter, as stated, very attractive. If your grades aren't the sharpest, if you're not the editor of the law review or some other position in school that would heighten your, bring you up in appearance, at least with other people, you have to sell yourself. I would say that for the appellate court, grades are extremely important. Your experiences on moot court, on the journals are very important, because all those judges do are write opinions. And I mentioned earlier the research and writing that's expected of you. Blue booking, oh my gosh, you have to know that blue book forward and backwards, and also then incorporate the court's own interpretation and special notations that are required for opinion writing. So grades are very important for the appellate and superior court levels. Trial court, again, experiences are a little bit different, but grades are important, just like anything else.
On top of that, with everything going on with COVID-19, some schools are moving to a more non-GPA format. How does that factor into your decisions?
We don't know yet. I guess we haven't seen that. I would say well, that's going to be difficult. I didn't realize that was true. I think grades within a range. I think what we're all saying is we want to see grades in a certain range, and then the rest is really how the interview goes and how you get along with that person. But there probably is a bottom range where, you don't want to fall below that, or you're going to have trouble getting those interviews.
Absolutely. It sounds to me from all of your answers like GPA will get the foot in the door, but in order to open the door for yourself, you need to find a way to stand out. Is that correct? And
how you hit it off with the judge in the interview. It's really a lot of chemistry, I think. For me, it is. If I interview that potential law clerk and I can just tell we have a conversation flowing, I think I'm going to get along with this person. My secretary and my present law clerk, they'll speak with them, and you get an overall impression. So if you have the right range with grades that you got the interview, if you got the interview, your grades were good enough. Now, how are you going to come off in the interview that's really going to strike the judge as a person that they can live with, get along with, and have be part of your family and legacy of law clerks for the rest of time? It's really going to be that interview chemistry.
Absolutely. John, can you chime in here really quickly and tell us maybe a little bit about what helped you to stand out? From your perspective, what did you do to help you stand out to your judge and get you in the door?
I don't know how helpful I can be because I applied and then I interviewed for one judge, and then she called me back the next day and asked me to be her law clerk. So I did something and it worked. I don't know exactly what that was because I don't have any other data to compare it to.
Well, that's an important point. Judges, we're trying to get this done quickly. So apply early. Don't wait. We want to get this done quickly. We know that we're competing with 400 other judges for the best clerks, and we're trying to get those interviews right away. We want the best clerk available, right? Think of it like the draft. It works the same way. It really does. And so as soon as somebody good comes in there, you say, oh, wow, man, this one, I think I want this one. We don't want to take a chance that they go next door and interview with the next judge and that judge hires them. We're not waiting. And so keep that in mind, because that's an example of what happened with John Morgan. Some judge said, this guy's good, and I want him before somebody else takes him. So keep that in mind, because I think sometimes people wait way too long to apply for these clerkships.
Yeah, I think I applied in around October or September or something like that. And I think within a week, I got an interview, and then the next day after the interview, I got the offer. I see some questions about people who have no ties to New Jersey. How do you stand out? I'm from Kansas, I guess, so I think I can safely say that as long as you sort of mention that you plan on practicing in New Jersey, that's generally enough for as far as my experience goes. It didn't seem to be a big factor in my interview. What I talked about in my interview most was, I think my judge wanted to know about law review experience and moot court experience that I had. So we just talked about that for a little bit, and my research and writing abilities and experience. So we've talked about GPA and how important that is. If your GPA is less than, if GPA is not your strongest point, but maybe you know some people, maybe you have really good connections, and maybe you have you had some really good experiences working at a firm or an institution or in a clinic or volunteering pro bono, maybe emphasize those more in your cover letter to sort of show, yeah, I didn't really get the highest grade on the final exam, but I was, instead of, sitting in the library on my weekends, every weekend studying, I was volunteering for a pro bono clinic and helping clients with real legal work. So, that experience I think is more valuable. As long as you have like the grades, connections, or experience, I think one of those three things will help you get the position even if you're lacking in the others.
For sure. And that's the important piece here to kind of take away from this. As you're going into these interviews, it's finding the ways to stand out. It's finding the ways to do so, but that is done before the interview. It's not done in the interview. It's done by being able to speak accurately to your experiences. And it's also done by you knowing what you're bringing to the table. And I think that there's an important self-awareness that needs to happen. You're not going in there bragging, but nobody else is going to sell you on this job the way that you're going to be able to. You need to be able to do that well. So let me take you to our final question. And I'll round robin this around to all the judges, but I'm going to start with you, Judge Covert, and ask you, why should a law student pursue a judicial clerkship?
Well, first of all, I did pursue judicial clerkships when I got out of law school, and no judge hired me. I don't know. So I ended up working in a prosecutor's office, which was great. But it was kind of one of my regrets. Not that I didn't try, it just didn't work out. I just think that the law clerk, the clerkship gives you the leg up. You really have an advantage when you go out into practice. Every one of my law clerks landed where they wanted to. Some are in government, most went into private practice, and some are partners in firms now. Depending on the progression, how long ago they clerked for me, they did very well, all of them. And they were all excellent. I've been very, very fortunate to have great law clerks all the way through, and wonderful people. But you network, you get to meet the attorneys in your practice area. They will know you. You will earn a reputation for yourself. You will get to know all the players in a courthouse. If you're smart, you'll get to know the other judges in your county courthouse as well. In addition to your colleagues also coming out of clerkships at the same time. There is really no other networking experience that can equal a clerkship. And you'll have it forever. I mean, there are judges that talk about their time as a clerk and everyone who knew each other then. So I think that really there's no reason not to do it unless you feel the money is a stumbling block for you. But I think you can make that up by having the leg up when then you go out into the world to a private practice, if that's what you want to do, by having that clerkship and really that experience that's so valued. And having a very enjoyable year while gaining that experience. There's not really a negative I can think of about doing a clerkship. So that's my sell, but it's the truth. And that's the experience I've had with my clerks.
Fantastic. Judge Velazquez, it looks like you want to chime in here.
She hit on something. I think in Hudson, we've got quite a few judges that were clerks in Hudson County. So I think it says something about the relationships and the connections that people make when they do these clerkships, because it's a pretty substantial a number. It's not just one or two. I can't give you an exact amount, but you're going to make relationships that will last your lifetime, not only with the judge and the people you meet, but with the attorneys that you meet in the courthouse that get to know you because they're dealing specifically in that area of the law. It may lead to job opportunities with them. It may lead to them introducing you to other people. That my point is, it's a relationship building opportunity. I always tell my law clerks, I look at this kind of like a continuing part of your education. Now you've learned the law. Now you're going to go out and start to see how it really works and take advantage of it, because you're going to be working for the rest of your life. And this may be your last year of kind of being able to have that almost academic type situation, because it's kind of like job training, right? So it's just a good opportunity in that way. So I recommend it to that everybody try it out.
Fantastic. And Judge Maven, can you speak a little bit to some of the maybe skills and characteristics that get developed for future employers, and maybe some of the jobs that you've seen some past clerks secure after their clerkship with the judicial?
Certainly. I would say that from my experience in the family court, you have a lot of opportunity to have contact with the litigants. You are the conduit between all the litigant and attorney phone calls and the judge. Judge never picks up the phone. Okay, we don't talk to people unless we know it's a lawyer or something of that sort. So in family court, you have a lot of self-represented persons. And if you're handling the calls from those persons, they have questions, or in court, you may have to interact with those persons. So you develop a lot of skill and intuition on how to deal with people, frontline people, real life stuff. That may be different than if you start and go into a law firm where you may have, depending upon the nature of your law firm practice, you may have that contact with litigants when you do your interviews, or if you sit in interviews with your partner or whomever. But in the family court, certainly you have that type of interaction. So you're going to learn from your own personality how to deal with stressful situations, how to deal with persons who are upset, how to direct people in the proper way without giving legal advice. And so you're going to find out a lot about yourself and your own temperament and ability to deal with multitasking, multi-personalities, and all of that goes along with our work here. Certainly that may be to a lesser degree in the civil division, in the higher, in those cases that are represented, but landlord-tenant court, small claims court, those types of where you have self-represented persons, again, there too, and you also get the opportunity to mediate in civil court in those particular areas. So there's mediation experience where you actually have to listen to both sides and help make a decision, help them make a decision. So you get to develop that skill as well. It's a very dynamic practice. I didn't clerk. I went straight into a law firm, like I indicated earlier, to do land use planning. So my universe was small. I worked with architects, engineers, planners, paralegals, and into zoning boards. It was a small environment, small community. When you're working as a law clerk, you have the courthouse to experience, all the different levels of involvement of people who work in the courthouse. And as was stated, your colleagues, your other law clerks who are there. I want to also indicate that an extreme benefit to being a law clerk is your opportunity to interact with the local bar. So you can go to county bar events, dinners, where you can interact, stand around socially and meet all these other people. Inns of court, most counties have inns of court, which are a mentor program between the barristers, the experienced judges, lawyers and judges, and the younger lawyers and law clerks. So that's a special opportunity to learn beyond the courtroom and to develop those relationships. There's no downside to being a clerk. Well, yes, there is. The downside to being a clerk is that you realize that you don't like the work, and then you're stuck with the judge and stuck with the situation for a year. But you make lemonade out of lemons. And the lemonade is that you cultivate a relationship and learn all that you can, absorb all that you can from what you observe. and make a situation that you think might not be exactly where you fit. Like was stated, you could have applied for a position in family court and then got transferred, the judge gets transferred to criminal. Now you're in criminal court. Well, you learn something about that. And when you go out in the real world, anything that you learn is a life lesson that you can apply to anything in the future. So you just have a broader view of everything. There's no downside.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. We're running up pretty close to our time here. We have about 5 minutes left. I do want to share some information about how to apply for our clerkships here in the judicial court system. But I do want to give our esteemed panelists one more opportunity to make one last pitch or to say one last thing to give you the understanding of what you're getting yourself involved with or anything that's still lingering on their minds that they want to let you know. So I'll start with Judge Velazquez. Is there anything left lingering for you?
One quick thing. I heard a long time ago, when you finish an interview, send a thank you note. And I was never big on that, right? I thought, who does that? But then one time somebody sent me a thank you note and I thought it was very nice. And then after that, I started getting upset when I didn't get thank you note. You'd be surprised at little things that kind of help you out and don't take a lot of effort. So just keep that in mind as a little trick.
Excellent. John, anything coming from you? Anything final that you want to let everybody know about?
Judge Maven touched on it briefly, but it reminded me about I think one of the biggest takeaways from clerking, and that is networking opportunities. I've gone to several networking events and I've seen judges that I've worked with there, and you just go up and talk to them when they're in a group of other attorneys, partners, big name partners from big law firms. And there was one judge that I worked with just briefly because my judge was on vacation and she had a 2-month-long trial. And she saw me and said hello and introduced me to all these partners and was ranting and raving about how much I helped her. I felt like I barely did anything to help her, but she was just telling all of the partners how great I was, and I'm kind of embarrassed actually. But then we had a conversation and got some business cards. And like I was saying before, one of the 3 ways you can, land a job is if you know somebody. And so being able to meet people, because a superior court judge told the attorney that you are good and that they recommend you, that's huge. And so, if you are on the fence about whether you want to apply for a clerkship, maybe keep that in mind. If you're like me and you don't have as many connections in the area, a clerkship would be huge to boost to put your name out there and help boost your reputation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Judge Maven, any final wisdom coming from you?
No, I would echo John's sentiments. For many years, I would go back to Temple every year and do a brown bag lunch. It was just my way of giving back to Temple law. And I would always say to the students, when someone gives you their business card and says, give me a call sometime, don't hesitate to do it. So Judge Ray, I say to you, I love my thank you notes, and it definitely makes a difference to me. When someone sends me a note to say, I enjoyed my discussion, I enjoyed my talk, I recommended that to all the students that I've spoken to over the years during my brown bag lunches. Write a note. It means something. Write a note, say thank you, just a little something to remind us of what our conversation was. It goes a long way, and the networking is just valuable. I would say also that if you don't come from a family of lawyers or judges or people with connections, I didn't. And the notion of networking scared me. When I went to Penn, the whole thing was, oh, well, I'm from so-and-so and I know this person and that person. I went to Penn and I came from nobody. My parents didn't go to school. My mother got a GED. My sister went to college, but the rest of us were just sort of making it along. So there was an expectation of going to college and succeeding, but I didn't have any role models for that. So knowing how to network, father was not in a country club, golfing, or any of that. But don't be scared about networking. Networking just means meeting people. And law clerkships gives you an opportunity to meet people. Meet people. And that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Keep meeting people, keep shaking hands, well, not right now, but keep shaking hands. When it's back on.
Bumping elbows.
and get to know the folks who are going to be important parts of your career, because it is a very small community once you get to know it, right? And then finally, Judge Covert, any wisdom coming out of Burlington County that we haven't touched on yet?
The only piece of advice I would give to the prospective law clerks is be yourself in the interview. Relax and be yourself. When judges interview law clerks, they're really trying to establish a rapport. And so tell them the interesting things you do and get that conversation going. I think that really is the way to form the connection if you're interested. And the thank you note is just a way of showing you're actually very interested in this job, and that the judge is looking for that too. So those two things I think will really set you apart.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to all of our esteemed colleagues, or all of our esteemed judges and panelists, to Judge Covert, Judge Maven, Judge Velazquez, and to John Morgan. Thank you very, very much for your time and for your effort here in teaching us a little bit more about what it was and what it means to be a part of this, this judiciary. Just to give you a heads up, I'd like to make sure that you know how to get yourself into this program. So there are some key dates that you should be aware of, and if you're interested in a clerkship for 2020 and 2021, there are a limited number available, and they open up on June 1st. So the law clerk notice vacancy we posted on njcourts.gov. You can find yourself there. On June 15th, applications for the clerkships are accepted on the 2021-2022 court term through the Judiciary Law Clerk web-based portal. And finally, on June 22, justices and judges may begin scheduling interviews and making offers for employment. And that's going to be important. As Judge Velazquez says, we want to get this done quick. So you might be hearing the very next day. We want to snap you up if we think that you're good. So to apply for the judicial position, you want to go to njcourts.gov and go to the law clerk recruitment page. If you need more information, go to njcourts.gov and go to that page directly. And if you have questions directly that we haven't been able to answer today, contact Human Resources at lawclerkfac@njcourts.gov. I'd like to thank one more time all of our esteemed panelists, Judge Covert, Judge Maven, Judge Velazquez, and John Morgan. Thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you to all the Pennsylvania schools who showed up today and all the Delaware schools that showed up today. We look forward to seeing you, hopefully, coming in the next year. Have a wonderful rest of your day.